what started happening in terms of my junior high experience. I moved into another school. I had kind of started to, grow into my adolescenthood. And at that point, lost all my baby fat. I had really long blonde hair. And, I wasn't aware maybe that I looked a certain way, but it was very evident to me and, quite evident to me now looking back that the young girls weren't interested in really integrating me into their group. And so again, that's really for me when school became traumatic, because this is when it started to become, where the attacks that I felt were specifically cruel, were specifically meant to really break me down. Not so much just a level of misunderstanding, but it became a very specific and targeted attack by these young girls to try to kind of unravel what little self-esteem I kind of had from, going through a divorce situation, a lot of traumatic stuff in my childhood, and then trying to integrate myself again into a new school. And so, little things. So again, really never inviting me to sit at their table in school, specifically making it difficult if I wanted to join a project with them, just doing whatever they could to really hurt me and really make me feel like I wasn't welcome. And, it got increasingly worse. They would show up at my house, steal my bike, make fun of that fact. There'd be parties and then they would specifically not invite me, that kind of thing. And again, that was, when you're a young person, a little bit difficult to deal with. And then again, it got to the point where it became really heavy when I came into high school. And again, it was another level of energetic integration in terms of a bigger school, a lot of different personalities, a lot of young people trying to figure out who they were, and obviously vying for a certain amount of dominance or popularity. Again, this was an experience for me in terms of trying to navigate the energy of the multiple personalities that existed within that building. I was still extremely shy, and it was kind of funny because it was in that era that that song "I'm a Barbie Girl" came out, and that was sort of like, there's just layers of things that happened to me in high school that were difficult. One of which, a group of girls broke into my house. We were quite poor. My mom was a single mom at this point, and stole all of our things. That became really difficult for my family. And then the attacks became more really, really scary. I remember that this group of girls would call me. We didn't really have cell phones back then, but they would call my house phone and basically sit on the other end of the phone and tell me that I should commit suicide, that I should kill myself, that nobody at school liked me, all of these different things. And as a young person, I didn't really know how to understand this because I'd never done anything to hurt anybody. I didn't understand where this was coming from. And to hear that, to me, it felt like everybody felt like that. And so, and it was a series of things. I had bought myself a car. I'd come out from a class and all my windows would be smashed. I remember one time they put paint remover on my car, writing things like slut. I mean, I had never even had a boyfriend in high school. I wouldn't even know really what that essentially meant in high school, because again, I was just so isolated, and then again, it got, more and more intense. There, in all of the school's bathrooms, again, my name being Barbara, and this whole era of the "I'm a Barbie Girl" song, it started to be like a theme of our high school. And our high school was big, like 800,000 kids. And every women's washroom, the trend became who could write more crazy, horrible things about Barbie. Now, Barbie was essentially me, but nobody knew who I was. And so it was just like a funny thing that all the girls did was, write. So I had actually a comment on one of my videos that prompted me to want to make this particular video, and I was actually thinking about it on my drive into work today, about how I kind of wanted to frame this particular kind of story in terms of how possibly it could help others out there that are dealing with, whether it's post-traumatic stress issues or traumas from your past, and how holding on to these things can really truly affect us into the later years of our lives and essentially stagnate our process in terms of really that self-love process, that ability to heal, dealing with issues in our lives. So, I want to take a trip back in time and kind of walk you through some of my experiences when I was a younger person in terms of school, and how this kind of the interplay into the whole dialogue around bullying, and what can happen to young people when they are going through those developmental stages of life. So for me, the journey starts, obviously, as it does for everybody, in early elementary school. And I was a shy child. I was a very introspective child. I was sensitive, and I really loved to study. I was a good student. I was a high performing, child in terms of intellectual endeavors. I really loved math, science, anything to do with learning. And unfortunately, because of this sort of dichotomy of being very, very shy, but very, very good scholastically, it made me a target. And again, in terms of students, right? Everybody that's young, they can have, a certain unique look. My parents weren't particularly fluent before they had gotten a divorce. So, I had average kind of clothes and, puffy blonde hair that my mom would, I have naturally curly hair. I hardly ever wear it that way, but my mom would brush it out into this sort of poodle-like hairstyle that wasn't particularly attractive. And, I was kind of an awkward looking kid, but I didn't care. I was artistic and I loved school and I loved creating. And again, it kind of, this shyness about my energy and this ability to really throw myself into the task of school made it kind of difficult sometimes to really connect with other kids. Now, again, we moved around a lot as well, and sort of the first school that I was at, I grew up with the kids in my neighborhood, and I had two very, very amazing close best friends. So it wasn't necessarily the first experience in elementary school. It's when we started moving that I had troubles, because I had trouble integrating myself into new student groups because I was so shy. I just didn't know how to approach other students. So this created a dynamic where, as I moved around to these different schools, I became kind of isolated. And what students tend to do when you have sort of an individual that's isolated, kids can be cruel, and they, that I experienced what a lot of young people do, in the school system, where I was, pretty bullied, and I was kind of thought of as a bit of a nerd because, again, part of my way of enjoying life, moving through life, was to study and to be very immersed in whatever was happening at school. And I was never interested in making fun of other kids or bullying other kids or being part of that group of children that did that to others, and that tends to be the popular kids that do those sort of things. So again, it was an experience for sure. And as I, got a little bit older, in junior high and high school, that's where, for me, the experience of, the cruelty of that energy of young people really kind of started to transform. And again, I've never really talked about this. It doesn't affect me in any way now, other than to provide context and provide a level of compassion and kindness in terms of the way I see others and the way I try to hold space for others, in terms of understanding, because I've been through some things that were, difficult in my past. write these messages on the cubicles of the washroom stalls. And I mean, the stuff was terrible. It was obviously horribly mean. I won't even get into what was written on the washroom stalls, and it was pretty much in every stall. So every time I had to go to the bathroom, I would read. It wasn't just like one or two comments. I'm talking like hundreds of comments, and it was hard. I would go in there and sit on the bathroom and cry, and like it was hard for me to walk down the halls. I remember being, in classes, and a group of boys throwing Skittles at the back of my head. There was a reason they were doing that. I don't want to get into whatever rumor that was, but it was hard, to sit through that and have the courage to come to school when I really didn't have any friends there. Because again, it was almost like if anybody befriended me, all of that, the weight of those attacks and those rumors and everything that was sort of ingrained in that energy, whatever it is, would follow that person. So nobody wanted to jump on that bandwagon and be the friend with like the most hated girl in school. But the funny thing is, I didn't do anything. I was never invited to any parties. I never had a boyfriend. Like I don't know what I was hated by these group of individuals for, essentially. One of the worst experiences from high school that I can remember was the day that somebody in the administration had this grand idea to replace the bathroom stalls. And I remember coming down from my comm class, and there was like probably 150 people in the hallways at school, and it was like a bunch of boys and girls, and they were just laughing and pointing, but it was such a big group I couldn't really understand what they were pointing at. And so as I come down the stairs, it's like they all turned around to look at me, and they're like, oh my God, there she is. And then it was like in that instant, I realized that they had removed the bathroom stalls, and everybody in the school was reading all of that horrible stuff people were writing about me. And I actually felt like this choking sensation, like I was like paralyzed, and I knew I had to go to where I was going, to the bathroom, to get past these stupid bathroom stalls and walk by this big group of people. And it was just terrible. It was like this massive anxiety like I'd never felt. But you know what? I picked myself up, and I just kind of stared at a piece of the brick wall and kept on walking and held my head up high. There's nothing really else I could do, right? But in terms of like eating my lunch, there was a big, obviously cafeteria area. I would never eat my lunch there. It was, even if I was to walk to the cafeteria, it was terrible. People were really nasty. They'd say things at me. I remember one time I was walking just to get a little bit of food, and somebody took a Subway sandwich and threw it at my head, and it kind of, hit me in the head. And, you can't let those things affect you, but they do affect you. And so one of the things that I did, while I still attended school, because there was a certain point where I just kind of stopped going, was that, I would sneak out of class 5 minutes earlier before the bell would ring, and then I would stand on the toilet stalls and lock myself in for the entire hour, and then nobody would be able to hurt me, essentially, in that half an hour. And it was hard because my parents didn't really understand how much I was going through at school. I tried to tell them, I tried to beg them to move me, and it just wasn't something that ever happened. I was never moved out of that school. And in fact, my parents were really frustrated that I wasn't getting good grades. So it was kind of difficult because I had the energy of, my family that was very upset with me because I wasn't performing. And then I had this, energy of feeling very uncomfortable at school. Now, why am I telling this story? Okay, and I want to circle it back to the whole purpose for me making this video. And it's because, again, somebody put a comment saying that they were still dealing with the trauma of what happened to them in school, and how, their health isn't good. And so I really want to talk a little bit about my story and how the energy of fear and the energy of trauma and hurt and pain and isolation transmuted itself into a series, I believe, of really difficult health issues in my teens and 20s and 30s. That, again, it's energy. That energy that pain, all of that negative energy that I was absorbing from those individuals, you know, at school, in my life, it had to manifest in some way. And because I wasn't lashing out at everybody, and because I was quite quiet and sensitive, everything was internalized. And what happened was I started to really start to dislike myself and start to feel like I was deserving of all of this treatment and I wasn't good enough and there was something really wrong with me. And I would actually ruminate on it. And again, the reason I'm bringing this up is I think it can help other individuals. So the more I would think about the phone calls, you know, saying I should end my life, all of these different things, all of the horrible energy that I had to move through just to exist, you know, never really capturing that energy of joy or happiness or, you know, the things that you're supposed to experience, you know, in youth, I descended into a lower and lower vibration of my own consciousness to the point where, again, I didn't want to exist anymore. I didn't feel the energy of love. I couldn't even conceive what that would be. Because again, all I had ever experienced was the contrast, the hate, the attack. And there was a certain point where I got to such a low place in terms of my health, in terms of my isolation, where the only person that was going to be able to fix my plight was myself. And I had to rewrite my story. I had to let all of the things that had caused me pain, that I didn't ask to have happen, I needed to put them away, put them on a shelf and never look at them again. And that's the only way my life started to transform. My health started to transform. I just had to leave that old timeline, that old version behind. And the only thing that I took from all of those experiences was the contrast. I really would meditate on, you know, the teaching. They know not what they do. They weren't aware of what they were doing, because if they had understood or felt even an ounce of the pain that they were causing me, nobody would wish to cause somebody that much pain. And the only reason that young people were doing those things to me is because they weren't secure within themselves. They were feeling insecure. So it's just a distorted way of trying to deal with your environment. And when I started looking at all of my experiences from a higher perspective, forgiving all of those individuals and starting to love myself and realize that I had so many great gifts. And part of the reason that maybe I made some of my peers feel uncomfortable was because I was really good at school. I was really smart. I did have a lot of gifts. I was super artistic. And, you know, I was starting businesses from a very young age. I started working when I was 10 years old. I had a lot of skills that were not typical of a lot of young people. So I think in a lot of ways, the strangeness that I was, or the way that I was different, my differences made others uncomfortable. Even in the sense that I looked quite different. Again, I had been working from a very young age. I liked to shop at the best boutiques. I would come to school looking very high-end because I would buy my own designer clothes, a lot of these things. I bought my first car at a very young age, and, you know, I picked a beautiful red convertible, but I bought it myself, you know? And so again, some of these things caused the other students or the other people that I was surrounded with in high school to have, you know, a bit of pushback against whatever it was, that the energy that I was bringing. And so in terms of moving past any kind of trauma in your life, how do you do it? How do you just let it go? And again, it's every time that energy crops up in terms of your mental patterning, that habitual thinking cycle that you get yourself into, that is that depression or that self-loathing, or, you know, where you're essentially, you know, kind of ruminating in that tragedy. You just stop it, and you stop the thought process, and you think of really good thoughts. And you have to be diligent about it. I really had to sit there and write lists about all of the you know, all the things about myself that were good, my affirmation lists, and then again, you know, really being, you know, focused on the fact that I didn't want to be egotistical as well. You know, I had seen the examples of people that were really in their ego and hurting other people, and you know, I'd been, you know, on the other side of that. So I 100% did not want to be that individual that hurt others. So I started to take on kind of a protective role. If I saw a group of people singling people out or being horrible to them, I would be that person that would come in and stand up for that person, because I knew how it felt. And you know, as I was able to do these things, it gave me my power back in terms of being an advocate for, you know, the underdog, and that made me feel good. And you know, essentially in my 20s, in my 30s, I was able to become, you know, really super grounded in terms of utilizing all of my skills. And I never really considered my high school years again. It didn't matter to me. And I started to see the breadth of my own skill set. I was able to build several multi-million-dollar corporations that I run still to this day. And you know, that was always a part of me. Those skills were always something that I had been gifted with from an early age. And I just had to realize that, you know, those were some of the things that made me unique. So why am I saying or telling this story? Because if you are residing in any kind of low vibrational thinking about yourself or others, because again, you can start to, when you've gone through pain, when you've gone through hurt, you can start to project it onto others instead of doing your own work. So it's a, you know, it's a two pathway journey. You need to work on yourself, and then you need to work on your projections at the same time, and attune them both to this unified path of unconditional loving energy. And when you can get there, you become a very, very peaceful, sovereign, grounded being. And it's a beautiful place to exist within, and your consciousness becomes very level, and it doesn't matter, you know, what obstacle or what contrast is coming your way, you're able to handle it from this very subtle yet powerful emanation of that core soul frequency. And it's going to take work. It took me many years, I would say probably a good 10 years of practicing, you know, this reprogramming of my own negative mental health patterns to get past a lot of that early childhood trauma. And you know, there's still things that are difficult for me, not to do with my past so much, but things that I struggle with in terms of my life now. But because I've had such a great amount of catalyst and contrast, and you know, my own battles with my health problems that I have been able to conquer, I do have this unwavering belief in my own strength and in the power of my mind to set myself back on the right course. And I can say 100% that it was releasing. It was releasing any of that pent up negativity, any of those blockages I was holding, any of the traumas that were still part of my mental programming, essentially putting them on a shelf, creating a new version of who I was, and just sticking to that new version that suits where I want to go. Not residing in my past, not residing in that energy that, again, was kind of pervasive in terms of my cellular structure for many years, because again, it's what I experienced. It was experiential, but moving into a new timeline, a new energy, and something that, again, was a very healed version of me. So hopefully this helps somebody out there that, you know, or anybody that's going through or has gone through trauma, bullying, anything like that. It seems difficult in the moment, but you have to really raise your consciousness to a higher level and realize that anybody that's attacking you is unaware. And if you can just remove yourself as much as you can, don't think about what they're saying. It doesn't matter. It's not the truth. It's not accurate. Look to yourself as your own cheerleader. Look inside of you and know that you are a beautiful spirit, and know you have beautiful things to give the world at large. Okay, I'm going to wrap this video up.